So today we will discuss about the class and objects. That means we'll see that how to create the class and the objects, okay, and how to do the program. We'll be writing, probably we'll be writing the first program using our classes and objects. Okay. So we know that the most important feature of C++ is the class. By implementing class, we implement the data hiding, data encapsulation, abstraction, all these properties. Okay, and it is similar to the idea of the structures that are used in C. So we can say a class is an extension idea of structure that is used in C. Okay, so what is structures in C? Normally we know that structures we can pack together different data types that are relevant for solving any problem. If some group of data is logically related, and we can then create a structure of that data. So I have discussed in the last week that if we want to create some format that will be followed by all the elements, so that can also idea of the structure. That means we can create a structure with this keyword struct, and then maybe any structure name student, and then we'll be defining different keywords like name, different data types like name, age, etc. Okay, so this name may be a character string, or the character array, the age may be int, etc. Okay, so different data types can be packed together to form a structure, and then we can create some structure elements using this structure name, and those elements will be following the same format, same template that we have already defined for the structure. Okay, so once the structure type is defined, we can declare the variables or the elements, and we can provide data to the elements. Okay, so just a simple example I have taken here for a structure called student. Here it declares a student as a new data type with all these things are there, character name, int roll, and float marks. Okay, so it is holding different types of data elements, and by this statement we are actually creating this A is an element of the structure which follows which is having the same template. So now we can next we can now follow, or we can now access each of the member variables. That is for A, there for the element A there is a name, space for name, there is space for role, there is space for marks. So for them we need to provide them the values. So we can provide them values by using dot operators. So directly we can use a dot role, a dot marks, a dot name, that is copied to here, Johnny is copied to here, etc. So these member variables, all these member variables can be accessed using dot operators. So all this thing is known to us. So we also know that in a pure C, it does not allow the structured data type to be treated like built-in types. Like for example, if I create a structure called complex, we cannot do this thing. We cannot add two complex number. We can assign the values using dot operator C1 dot C2 dot C3 dot something, C3 dot X, C3 dot Y. We can access the values, but we cannot directly add in this way. Okay, so our idea of using object-oriented programming so that we can replicate the real world things like the built-in data types, we we want to use our own data types. We want to create our own data type, that is our class, and then we will do the same thing with the built-in data type variables. Whatever we do, we'll be doing the same thing with the class variables or with the structure variables, that is the structure elements. Okay, so in pure C we cannot do this type of thing. And also the C structure, they do not permit any data hiding. All the data members, they can be directly accessed by the structure. They can be directly accessed from any function. that is out of that structure, written out of that structure. Okay, so by default the structure members are public. So here I have written one example. So here you can see it is a structure and it is having two variables and one function which is taking one variable as an argument, and this is how it works. Okay, and in the function this is the definition, z is initialized to y and y is printed inside function, and here we are using this, we are accessing this x dot x1 dot x. We have created this structure variable, structure element, and we have just taken the value, initialize the value 10 to this x1 dot x and 20 to this x1 dot y. And if we print x1 dot x, x1 dot y, it will get printed. Next, I am calling this function. Next, I am calling this function and passing 30. So 30 is copied into z. So z value is 30, and here this 30 will be output. Okay, so this is the output. So if I use this is a C++ structure where we can use both variables and functions. Okay, so in C it is not possible to have functions. So in C structures we don't find any functions, but in C++ we can have both variables and function. But our idea is whether we can possibly we can be as close as to the built-in data types or not. Okay. So for that we need some functions as well as some behaviors that we already incorporated within the structure. But this thing works fine. Okay, till everything is like within the structure, and everything within the structure is by default public. Okay. So now if we means it can also take some variables as private. Okay. So some variables, if I explicitly define some variables as private and some are public, then what happens you see. So this is the this is where some variables are taken as private. So I have made this x variable as private and these I have kept as public. Okay. So what happened here? Previously this statement was running fine. Previously this particular statement was running fine, no error is given. But here this statement won't work because from outside main we cannot have anything to be accessed which is defined as private. So what is this private and public? Do you know what is this private and public? Yes.
Access specifier.
Access specifiers, yes, these two things, this private and public, and there is one more access specifier called protected. So this, if something is written as private, that means its scope is within the class. Okay, you can access these private data members from within the class itself. And if anything is written as public, so you can access them from outside the class, from main and from any other function, you can access them directly. Okay, so just recall the picture of any object. So whenever we have written this thing, that object is having data and some functions that operate on that data. Okay. So you recall this structure, recall this pattern of any object. So normally what happened, we normally define all the data members as private. Okay, so they are as private and these are open to all. These functions can be called from outside. So I think you remember I told that objects, they communicate among themselves via their functions. So these functions can be called from outside, that is from main or from somewhere, and then means via this function we can access the data, and we can create this type of restriction using these access specifiers. That means they specify how much you can access and how much access is restricted. Okay. So if something is private, that means that can be private, that can be accessed inside it. Okay, so x dot 10, it is defined outside, it will give some error. But this y and this y, this z, it will not give error. They are private, they are public. Okay. So C++, they incorporates all these extensions and they also solve this problem of private and public. This thing is not supported in structures. C++ classes, they support this thing. They support this private and public. So they have incorporated all these features along with some more features of structures, and we have created a new user defined type that is known as class. Okay, so there is a clear separation, clear differences between the structure and the class. Okay, so this is the error. So the similarities are, that means in both C++ classes and structures, both allow wrapping of data and methods or functions, and members need to be tagged using the access specifiers, that is private and public. You can have them. Okay, you can either have private, you can have public, both in classes and in structures you can find it. But the very basic difference is, if something is, means the very basic difference is the default access specifier in structure is public. Okay, and the default access specifier in class is private. So if you made explicitly, if you made something as private, you need to keep in mind how to use them. You cannot access them from outside the class. But in C++, if something is private, if in C++ class, if something is private, that can be accessed by the functions inside. Okay, so that is the difference, and also there are some similarities, and from now onwards we'll be writing down the classes. Okay, so here in class, here I have included one example where I'm showing you that I have not written anything here. So previously I have not written anything here also, like private or public, nothing is there. So it is by default public. So all these things were working. But here the same code I have just replaced with class. Okay, just you see this one. I have written this code structure. Okay, so nothing is written there. Just I have writing here class in place of this structure. Okay, so previously it was working fine. See, when it is struct, it is working fine. Yeah, see, it is working fine. But I'm doing the same thing with class. So by default, this is private. It is giving some error. With the same code, it is giving some error. Okay, so imposing this private and public, we are actually, what we are making, we are making this thing, this particular data members and the member functions, if required, we are making them public, private. Okay, by default private. So why we are doing so? For protecting the data, because our aim is to protect the data within the class and to use it as and when required. Okay, so basic structure of the class or of the object is, we'll be having some data that we will protect as private, and then we can have some function. We can also have some private function, but mostly we have some public functions that will be accessing the data. So whenever we want to access this data from outside the class, we can from main, whenever we access, we will be creating the objects, and then we'll be using dot operator, and we'll be calling this function which can indirectly access the data. Okay, so we are coming to this thing next. Okay, that how we'll be doing that. So we know that class is a way to bind data and its associated function together. Now, how to specify the class? So for using class, we need to do two things. For specifying the class, it is having two parts. First is class declaration. Next is class function definition. So syntax for class declaration is, we'll be starting this thing with keyword class and any valid class name, maintaining all the naming convention. Okay, and then there is a opening braces and there is a closing braces along with this semicolon. Okay, and within this, here it follows the class declaration. So what we are declaring, we will be specifying the specifiers, that is some data variables that is known as the data members, and some member functions. Variable declarations and function declarations will follow, both in the private access specifier and also in the public access specifier. Okay, so here is the here is how we can do this thing. Okay, so next is the variable declared inside the class are known as data members, and the functions are known as member functions or methods. Okay, so alternatively we say these as member functions or methods. So only these member functions can have access to the private data members and private functions that I have mentioned, that only this particular functions, they can have access to these data members and to these functions. Okay, and the public members are open to all. They can be accessed from outside the class. Okay, so here is an example of a class. Okay, so how the class is declared. So here class student is declared, and we are defining the behavior, that is characteristics and the behaviors of the student. So my aim is to, I'll be having two data members called age and role. Okay, and I'll be having two functions that will be one of the function will be taking this value of age and role for each of the student, and one function for display the value. Okay, so this is a class student. How it looks? It looks these are the two data members that are in the private section. So private members can be accessed only with the class by default public members, by the public members and the functions. So if I don't write down this private word, then also these all of these members are considered as private until and unless we define them as public explicitly. Okay, so even if you are not using this private keyword, that is okay, that is fine. But if you want to make something public, that you need to specifically mention. Okay, so clear up to this?
Yes, yes.
This is class declaration. Okay, so we have declared the class, that is what will be the data members, what will be the member functions, what are their declaration, the function declaration, return type, whatever be the argument we are passing, etc. Okay, so here I have to keep it simple, here I have not taken anything, we are not returning anything, we are not taken anything. Okay, so next part is to, this declaration is over. Next part is to define the function. Okay. So, before defining the function, let us see how to create the objects. Okay. So, like the normal structures, creating structure element, how we are creating structure elements, the same way we are creating the objects. Okay. So, we can create student object X, either we can create X, Y, Z at a time, or student X, student Y, student Z, anywhere in our program, or at the end of the class declaration also we can create. Okay, but this is the popular one that we use. Okay, so next is memory allocation for the objects. So before going to discuss how the member functions are defined, normally like normal functions. If we're going to discuss that, let us discuss how the memory allocated for the objects. Okay, so whenever we create some object, whenever we create any object, memory gets allocated for that. Okay, so how they are allocated? So if we are we are creating 3 objects for student. Okay, so there will be for X, for Y and for Z. There are 3 objects. 3 objects are created, and we know the picture of an object is like this. So for X, student X, two members, space is allocated for 2 members, role and age, because the members are age and role. So role age is a age and role for this one also, and age and role for this one also. Okay. So whenever we create object, separate memory is allocated for the data members. Okay. And only one set of functions are created. So we have two functions. One is display and another is get data. Okay. So only one set of this function is created, not for every x, y, and z. Can you relate the idea of having the fruits class, where we have mentioned that fruit will be having number of seeds, color, and shape. These are the properties. Okay, and how the differs? If this is apple, if this is orange, if this is banana. So how they differ? If these are the properties, number of seeds, color, and say shape. Okay, so if these are the property, apple is having one set of values, orange is having a different set of values than apple, and banana is having different set of values than this apple and orange, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
So the data variables here, I have not defined any function. Okay, so the data variables will be having separate set of values. How I'll say that this is my roll number 1, this is my roll number 2, this is my roll number 3. Maybe their age is same, but roles are different. Okay, so we are having separate values for them. We are having separate values for them. Okay, so memory is allocated separately for the data member for every object. And whatever be your number of objects for all x, y, z, whatever dot be your number of objects, only one set of functions are created. Okay, are defined. Every object will be using that function. Then how I'll say that this is for me, this is for this display is called for x, this display is called for y, this get data is called for x or y. How I'll know this one? We need to differentiate it. Otherwise, say we want to take this value from this keyboard for x, we want to display the value of for y. And if how will be this means defining, if I call display and get data, they don't know this is called for x, y, or z or not. So here comes the binding part, that we need to bind them. Okay, so let us see how it is done. So this is what I have already discussed. There is this is common for all. Space for the functions. No separate memory is allocated for the member functions when the objects are created, and the space for member variables are allocated separately for each object when they are created. Okay, so we create the separate space for age and role for every object. Okay, so next is the size of the structure. Say, for example, this is the structure, class declaration, and here is one variable x, another variable int, and this is one function fx. So what is the size? So size depends on the equal to the combined size of its data members. That means here two data members are there. For function, there is no space allocated. So x and y, for x and y, what will be the size? For actually for C++, the integer is of 4 byte. Okay, so that's why the size of x1, I have used size of operator, x1 is 8. 4 plus 4, 8. Okay, now say if I have a class, say I have a class and don't have any data member. So this is the function. Say I have a class, but I don't have anything in the class. So let's comment out this thing. Okay, so what will be the size? Say x1. This is x1. What is the size of x1? Can you tell me? There is nothing. I told that it will be the combination of the both variables. If I activate it, if I run it, I'll be seeing 8. The size of this one is printing 8. Okay, and if I write down this one only, is printing 4. Okay, then if I deactivate it and nothing is there, only the class definition, only a class declaration is there, just simply nothing is there. So what if it's like that? So what will be the size? Any guess? 0.
This one 0.
Anyone who knows C++? Who knows this one? The idea of class and all? Any idea? It's definitely not 0. 0 means it is not no specification. That means this class is defined, na? This class is declared. It is known to the compiler. So what happened? See, if I run it, it will provide 1. Why 1? Why 1? Actually, if there is no data member, then we need a dummy space allocation so that we can manifest the existence of the class. That means we let know the compiler that there is a class. Okay, so for that 1 byte is allocated. That represents the dummy allocation. Okay, so you cannot ignore that this class is defined, this class is declared. You cannot ignore that one, isn't it? So it will not be 0. Just to make it understand that, just to manifest that existence, just to maintain the existence of the class, it will be allocating 1 byte. Okay, so size of the class, even if there is no data members or no methods, then it is known as it will be 1. If there is no data member but only methods, then also it will be 1. Okay, so now next is how to access the my question is that if something is there, if some function is written, now how I'll be telling the compiler that I am going to say I am having 50 students. Okay, so if for each of the students I am writing down their roll number, age and their marks. Then if I have only one set of function, how I'll be telling them? Is it possible to send is it possible to identify the functions by the objects? So here comes the accessing, how will be accessed. Okay, so every data member is accessed by the object name. If the object name is X, it is accessed by the object name and a dot operator. Okay, so if I write down something X dot roll, that means we'll be accessing the role variable of the object X. If I write Z dot age, that means I am going to access the age for Z variable, Z object. Okay, so this dot operator and object name need to be appended for every calling of or accessing of every data member or member functions. Okay, so the dot operator are used to access the class members. Anything means we can access the functions as well as we can access the data members. Okay, so for accessing the function, this is the syntax, x.display. Okay, so how they works actually? First, let us take this one, x.display. Then I'm talking about these 2 points. Okay, first let us consider this one, because we want actually that to display the values that are inserted in x.age and x.roll. Okay, now this display function, whenever you write down this x dot The display function, the control automatically understands that display function is called for this object. So now whatever they will be displaying, they will be accessing this object and the variable. Okay, so x.display sends a message to the object x requesting it to display its content. Okay, and again comes the idea of the access specifiers. If something is written as private, it cannot be accessed from outside the class. Okay, so they can be accessed only through the member functions of that class. The main cannot contain the statement like this. So previously in C++ structures, we have seen we can directly initialize the values. But here we have defined age in the private section, so we cannot do this thing from main. Okay, so for that we need to call any function and public function, and then the function can also be accessed with this dot operator, and this function can modify. Okay, so let us see how. So so this say x, this y, and this z. Okay, so let us see how they are done. So this is say this age is having 20 and roll is 1. Then the age of this is say 30 and roll is say 2. And the age of z is say 10 and roll is say 3. Okay. So whenever we do this thing x dot, I'm taking the display function, and if this is the definition of the display function, that it prints x and y. Okay, using cout. Okay, I'm just writing normal statement, not writing the proper one. Okay, so if this is using cout, if I display this x, y, z, so if I call this one actually, so can you tell me how to print x, y, z, x and z, cout? Let us write it down. M class student, and then int roll, int age. So this is int roll and int age. So let us know this is as public. Let's make this is as public. First, let us make this is as public. So how it will be? Say this is x1. So how to print this one? For x1, whenever we create object, the memory is allocated for roll and age. Now I want to insert the value 1 dot roll. This is 1 and x1 dot age say 20. Okay, now how to print that? What I'll print? Tell me.
x1 dot roll.
x1 dot roll. Age is x1 dot age. Okay. See if I run it. What is the error? Oh, acha. XY. This must be student, isn't it? So it is printing roll and age. It is printing roll 1 and age 20. Age is equal to 20. Now, if I want to do this thing, the same thing with x2, one more object. What to write? Again, This one we need to initialize. So how to initialize this one? What will be the change here? X2
dot roll next.
X2 dot roll. So I need to write it down separately. X2 for X2 I need to write it down separately. So if I run it, this is for X1 and this is for X2. Okay. So if there are 100 students, say 200 students, is this possible that we'll be creating this one and we'll be just giving the value to them? So can we write some program which will take the, can we write some function which will take these values from keyboard and which can take the display this one? Are you getting my point? Say if I have like X1, X2, if I have 50 students, I want to take the value for 50 student. I want to take the value for 50 student and want to display it. Okay, so is it a good idea to provide this, creating these 50 students and then providing for each student this initializing and then 50 statements for displaying? Is it a good idea, or is it a good idea that we'll be having some function and we'll be calling them? Which one is the good idea, first one or second one?
Ma'am, the second one.
The second one. So we can create some functions. So function can be say void display function and say void input function. So input function, in the input function we want that this particular part will be going inside the input function and this particular display thing will be going inside the these two functions, the display function. Okay, so let us just write it down. In place of declaration, let us write it down the definitions of display and definitions for input. This is permissible in C++. Okay, so what will be the statement for display? We know this is a statement for display. Okay, so let us take this one, Control C. Fine. Now the in for input, what we'll be writing? Cout enter roll and age. And then we can take scene. So what I'll write? This one. Just not taking them from keyboard. Okay. But if I write it down for X1, will it work? Actually, I want that this display function for all the objects. So I cannot specify this thing as x1.roll. So this is wrong, isn't it? Are you getting my point?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So we cannot specify. Now we need to make it generalized so that it can be used by everyone. So here also age and roll. Now the point is, my point where I was, that is how I'll understand that next this thing. Let me just delete these 4 statements. Now I have created x1 and x2. Now if I want that, previously I was writing down x1.roll, x1.age, then how we will be understanding that we want to input that is in roll and age. So if I call this now using x1, if I call this input function, so your control automatically passes this x1 in the calling function. This input function is called for x1. So now the execution is for x1 and this role will be treated as x1.role and this age will be treated as x1.age. Okay. So if I do this thing, now if I run it for x1 and if I do this display for x1, for both of them, as I am specifying this object, this input will work for this object only. This display will work for this object only. Okay. So we are binding them using object and dot operator. So now if I enter role and age, it is not specified anywhere that for which object we are entering. Okay. So say I am entering 1 and I am entering 45. So what it is giving? Role is 1 and age is 45. So it is giving for x1. Okay. Now say if I write it down x2 dot input. Okay. x2 dot input. I'm calling. So first x1 dot input is done. So say 1 and 23. Next, say 2 and 34. Okay, so it comes to an end, no display is there. So now if I do this display afterward, or I have not displayed this, I have displayed only x2. So first one is taking the value 1 and 23, but whenever I enter this one 2 and 45, so it is displaying this one. So x2 is called, so display is working for this. Here no display is called. So you understand this thing now, how they are binded. Even if you are writing only one copy, you are not mentioning them which is for x1, it is for x2 or x2. Whenever you are writing down, whenever you are using dot operator and calling the object using this can be accessed with this object. They are binded. So you understand this concept? Okay, right. Is there any confusion? Tell me.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
So next comes that how we can define our member function. Okay, I'll take 5 more minutes. So for defining member function, we can do them outside the class definition or inside the class definition. So how we are doing inside, that we have already seen in the example, that the function declaration is replaced by the definition. There only you need to write down the definition, removing the semicolon and writing down the whole function body. And for outside class declaration, this is the syntax. You need to mention the return type, then the class name, and what is this?
Scope resolution.
Yes. So this is scope resolution operator. So one of the use of scope resolution operator, we have seen that it can access the global data members from anywhere, isn't it? So this is the most popular use of scope resolution operator. Okay, so return type, class name, then scope resolution operator, then the function name and the argument list and the function body. So we are defining this. This is the outside of the class. If I defining your function out of the class. So why this particular part is required? Mainly this particular part is required. Why? Can you tell me? Any idea? Why this class name and scope is written? For any function definition, we know that return type, function name and argument list is fine and the function body goes well. But why this thing is required? Why this student and this thing is required? Any idea? Say, for example, say there is a class called student. Okay, having some member function and one display function that display the data members. Say another class in our program, we are having a class called teacher. So teacher is having also some data members, and those data members are displayed with a display function. So the function body of this display function and the function body of this display function is different. But this, the declaration, this is same. Now, if you want to define this function outside the class, and if you want to define this function outside the class, how you will be differentiating? We need to tell the compiler that this particular display belongs to student and this particular display belongs to teacher. So that's why in which classes scope the function belongs to, this member function belongs to which class, that we specify using the class name and the scope resolution. Now you understand why we are using this one? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So we'll be writing down the class name and the scope resolution if we are defining the member function out of the class, because out of the class anybody can define any other class also may be there who is defining their own display function. Okay, so out of the class when we are defining this is fine, and in the class if we define, that is not required. No need to, because it is within the class scope. By default it is within the class scope. So this is the whole definition and declaration of our class. So previously we have declared the class just by mentioning the declaration of the data members, but you can write it down. You can define them inside or you can define them outside. Outside definition is this we need to maintain. Okay. So now if we now do this thing, if we not create an object X, and if I call this X.getData, what it will display? X.getData, X.the control goes here. Now this getData, this age is actually X.age, isn't it? If this is X.getData, then if this is, if say there is one more object called student Y, and you write down Y.getData, so that time the getData will be called, but this age is converted as Y.age. This role is converted as Y.role. Getting my point?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I shown you the thing. Okay, so there I have used some of the examples, but today I think do you have any other class?
Yes,
After
ma'am.
this? Okay, so today let me stop here, and we'll be discussing some of the examples after this, and also other facts related to this. So you understand how to write down program? A simple one. How I have written?
Yes, ma'am.
Here also I have defined them inside class, but I can define this thing outside the class also. So what I need to do? Just I need to write down here the return type, the class name, then the scope resolution, and here I need to just declare them like the normal functions. I need to declare them. Okay, so it will do the same thing. It will do the same thing. So if I write down now x1 dot display, run it. Sorry. So it is taking value 123. It is displaying say 3 and 23. Again it is displaying 3 and 23. So first one is working for x1, second one is x1 for x2. So you understand how the functions, how the member functions are defined, and I have defined everything in public. If you can make this as private, and you can see the difference, because we know that the private data members can easily be accessed by the functions that are inside in the class. Okay, we know that the structure. So it will remaining same. It will do the same result. It will display the similar type of thing. It will work fine. So if this is structure, it will not work. Okay, so you understand this thing, na? How the class is written. So from now onwards, we'll be considering the class and we'll be defining the member functions either inside the class or maybe the outside the class, and we need to maintain this syntax. So you understand this thing, na? Clear up to this? Any query?
No.
Okay. So let us stop here. And let's meet on Monday.